Okay, so a lot of people decide that they want to test out the merchandise, you know, and they decide that before they get married, hey, let's just live together to see how it works. Well, is living together a good choice?
When we started living together, I just assumed and felt and believed and trusted that this would end up in a marriage.
I probably couldn't do it myself, but I think other people could do it as long as they know the person.
I think it's kind of crucial because you might find after you're living with them for 6-7 months that they're not right for you.
We disagree with that.
Bad idea.
In my culture, we don't live together, you know.
Live together first.
His nieces and nephew ended up getting married and having children before we did. And, well, we didn't get married anyway, but...
I'd want to live with them to see what they're like.
Living with a person 24/7 is totally different from just seeing them whenever you have free time.
Like how they fold their clothes and whether they brush their teeth or not in the morning.
Well, I think it's a good idea because you get to see how a person really is when you're living with them.
It's like a trial. You know, it's first try.
2/3 of teenagers think you should live together before you marry. And frankly, it sounds logical and it seems reasonable. Let's give this relationship a test drive before, but you cannot practice permanence. A marriage is permanence and you cannot practice how to be permanent.
What does it mean if a man's willing to live with you? Well, a lot of young women think it means that he loves you and you're going to be together forever. Turns out that men who just live with women and don't marry them, and who have no plans to marry them, are less committed than men who are just dating.
We had a beautiful apartment, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, huge place. We had a dog. And I just took care of the dog and took care of the house. And when he would come home, me and the dog would go to the door and, you know, greet him, "Hi, honey." You know, we were just so happy that he was home, you know, and it was like a marriage.
Living together is not the same thing as being married. And I think it's especially important that romantic young women process this information. If a man is not willing or not eager to marry you, you have some really important information about him, and he may love you and you may love him and you may have a lot of good things about this relationship, but one or both of you are holding out on each other in some important way.
You don't have to live together to get to know a person.
I feel like you wouldn't even be, you know, saving anything for that person.
I don't think it's a good idea to be living with someone that you're not really committed to.
Living together does not produce, we know this, it doesn't produce the same kind of benefits. Your children are not better off if you just live together rather than marry. You won't be happier and healthier and wealthier if you live together rather than marry. Moreover, your likelihood, if you do go on to get married, that you'll end up making a bad marriage and end up divorced is actually higher if you live together. Often, particularly young women who are living with men have very high rates of unexpected pregnancy. And I think it's because in the women's mind, often they feel like this is just like being married and they want to be together. But the man has not actually made that commitment to her or to her children or to the family unit. And it can produce some pretty difficult situations and even disastrous results.
Don't think that your partner is going to marry you just because you've had a biological child from him or her. That's not necessarily the case. Unfortunately, some couples whose living together relationship hasn't worked out, and the excuse is, well, that was the wrong person. So now I'll move on to another person. Now, as a gender, the men tend to move on more frequently than the woman. So women, be well aware. So what happens with women is they're getting older, they're getting tireder, they're getting more worn out, they're getting used up more, and they're being cast away increasingly more. So suddenly they're not in the pool of desirable candidates as a prospective bride. And the men, who as a gender, can be sort of agelessly very attractive and in that pool of desirable bachelors. So the women have sort of used up their chits, their coupon, so to speak, and the men can move on.
We started living together. I think it was because my mother was opposed to our relationship. And I guess I was rebellious at the time. And I needed a place to live. And we ended up living together because we wanted to be together. When I started living together, I sort of like broke away from my friends. I didn't keep a lot of my friends. I was ashamed of living together. I took on his friends. and I barely had my own friends. When we started living together, I just assumed and felt and believed and trusted that this would end up in a marriage. But there were signs, and I didn't listen to them. In the first year, he specifically said, oh, I'm not the marrying type. And I didn't listen to that. You know, I think what I said to myself at the time, he'll change his mind. You know, because it's like, this is me, you know, he'll change his mind. I'll get him to change his mind. And that's what I believed, that I was able to change his mind. And I've learned you can't change anyone. You can only change what you do. Every day he would tell me he would love me, every day. And we would go attend other weddings, family, you know, other family members, and attend their weddings. And I would even joke and say, wow, you know, your nieces and nephews, they're going to grow up. And they're going to pass up, they're going to grow to an age where they're going to end up having children, and they're going to get married before we are. And that's exactly what happened. His nieces and nephews ended up getting married and having children before we did. And, well, we didn't get married anyway, but we lived together for about 12 years. I finally gave him an ultimatum, and around November, I said to him, I said, you know, if we don't get married by the end of this year, I'm going to move out. And he said, if you move out, this relationship is over. The following April, I packed my stuff and I moved out. And still having hope that if I moved out, that would jar him, change his mind. But he never did. And one day he said to me, this was after we weren't living together anymore, and he said, I should have never lived with you in the first place. He said, I should have never moved in, and I should not be in a relationship unless I'm ready for a marriage. And of course that devastated me, because I'm like, you're going to say this after all these years, you know? I cried a lot. I probably cried for 2 years maybe, or about 2 months. I cried for 2 months. You don't have to live together to get to know a person. You can spend time with them. You can go do errands together, go shopping together, do the laundry together, visit one another and visit each other's families on holidays, or you can spend time together and get to know a person without living with them.
When couples separate after being intimately involved sexually over a period of time, you do not just simply separate. It's not like moving apart like this. As one pastor put it, it's more like tearing, and pieces of you stay with the other person, and a part of you is lost forever with that other person.
You have become inappropriately bonded with someone of the opposite sex, someone you thought you loved, someone you thought as a prospective marriage candidate, and you've become so bonded, you've lived as what you thought was a marriage, as a married partner, and you've left pieces on you, on that other person from you, your emotions, your body, your soul, your psyche, and they have left pieces on you as their partner, and you've actually experienced a premarital divorce.
You cannot practice permanence. Marriage means permanence. You can't practice that. Couples who live together before marriage have a higher rate of divorce than couples who don't. Couples who live together and then break up experience a premarital divorce.